Now, today, as this program is being recorded, it is Thursday. It is the day before Good Friday. It is the day before the crucifixion. It's the night of the last Seder that Yeshua had on earth in the flesh, which the church knows as the Last Supper. Everybody knows about the Last Supper. There are still people, I've been doing this for, I don't know, maybe 20 years, doing Messianic Seders and teaching all of this, maybe a little more. But there are still people who look surprised when I mentioned that the Last Supper was a Passover Seder. Now, if you don't know that, that's pretty bad. And so, as my friend Paul Wilbur likes to say, the church forgot that she's Jewish. And over the centuries, this is what this has led to. But we know, and you know if you're watching this network, that the more you study these things in depth, the stronger your faith becomes, the more solid your faith becomes, the deeper your roots go. And so, of course, the night of the last Seder, the Last Supper, whatever you like to call it, I don't get too hooked up in terminology, and because it can be very divisive and it can be pretty weird at times, but I'm not going to get into that. But the Seder, of course, was held at sundown, or right after sundown, on the Thursday night of Yeshua's final week. Now, Friday was Passover, Saturday, Shabbat, a very special Shabbat. But as you know, the day begins at sundown. And so the Seder that he celebrated with the apostles was actually Friday, so that the Seder, Gethsemane, the arrest, the trial, if you could call it that, which violated multiple laws, and ultimately the crucifixion, the taking the body down from the cross and putting it in the tomb, all occurred on Friday. All occurred on the same day by Jewish time. In the church separates Thursday and Friday, of course, because we count the day as starting at midnight. So however you want to look at it, the important thing, though, in my mind, is that all these things happened on Friday. It was all the same day. And so the Seder in that upper room was the transition from the old covenant to the new covenant. Yeshua himself says this when he takes the cup of wine, the cup of redemption, the third cup. And I know if you're watching this, if you go to this network, you've been to scores of Messianic Seders over the course of your life, and maybe even some traditional ones. But you know that my wife and I have been doing Messianic Seders for probably at least 15 years now. And in fact, we just did one last night at a church near our home. And people are very impacted by it because there's so much in it that they don't know about. And like I've said before, we've never left a church or a home where people have just said, "Oh, that was nice. Thanks for coming. We'll see you." There's always a lot of excitement. There's always a lot of questions. There's always people that say, "Wow, I didn't know that. Wow, thanks for pointing that out." You know, I've been a believer for 70 years and I never thought of that before. So it's quite a powerful event, and it always is. I I can't think of any that have been boring or that people have said, that was nice. Bye. People really like it. Many pastors don't even know Old Testament roots. In fact, we have a local church in our area. I won't mention any names, but it's very well known. You might call it a mega church. It's absolutely huge, and they have multiple events, always something going on at the church. And two of the pastors came for many years to the Friday night one in Messiah. And they both admitted freely that they didn't know any of this. They went to Bible school or seminary or whatever it was, and they spent very little time studying the Tanakh. They spent very little time studying Hebrew roots. And I was flabbergasted because I'm just an amateur and I'm not a theologian. I'm not a scholar. I just read some commentaries, and these pastors are professional people that have been trained and didn't even know the basics of Passover. So that was shocking to me. So it's important to teach this to everyone in the church, even the leadership. We've done seders at churches where the leadership team hasn't even come because people wanted to do it, but the leaders didn't want to do it. So you get a wide variety of reactions, but I'm obviously not going to go through the whole Seder because there's something else too I want to get to, but I think it's important to point out some of the things, and we use a Haggadah that, I think that's the first time I ever held anything up on the program, a Haggadah that my wife and I put together quite a few years ago. It came from several sources for Messianic Seders. And Haggadah, of course, is the telling. It's the telling of the story. Seder itself means order because everything is done in an order. You know, when Paul writes, he says everything, and he writes to the Corinthians and says, at your service, everything should be done in an order. You can't have disorder. And so it means order. Haggadah means the telling. And the first thing I like to point out is the fact that God gives us 7 feast days, the feast of the Lord, 7 holy days to celebrate. And they're all in the Torah, of course. And interestingly, the church doesn't celebrate any of them. And people have a passing knowledge of what Passover is. You mentioned first fruits, people will have a clue. But 7 holy days. The New Testament gives us no holy days that we're commanded to follow. They're all in Torah, 7. And you know all that. I'm not going to belabor that. Passover, of course, is a critically important one because it is a freedom festival. It's the release, it's the freeing of people based on slavery in Egypt. And through Moses, God gives a formula. We're not going to talk in detail about any of this, and I'm just going to assume you know all the plagues and things. But he gives the mechanism for deliverance is going to be killing a lamb and putting the blood on the door of your house. If you have the blood of a lamb, small l, if you have the blood of the lamb over your house, you are safe from the curse. Now, that sounds kind of silly and weird almost. Because after all, why did he not tell the slaves to rise up? Why didn't he tell the slaves to make weapons, start killing Egyptians, start sabotaging the Pharaoh's stuff? No, he said, get a lamb, lives with you for 4 days. You kill the lamb, you put the blood, you eat the lamb, and you go. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. So if you put the blood, you didn't have the curse. Just like in later on in the book of Numbers, the account of the bronze serpent. You get bit by the serpent. It's a painful, poisonous bite. But if you go out of your tent and you go look at the image of the serpent on the pole, you're saved from the venom of the serpent. In other words, you don't die from the bite. And I'm sure I've been around a long time and I know how people are, except there's still times where I'm surprised how people are. I'm sure there were people at the time that said to Moses, you want us to do what? We're going to kill a lamb and put the blood on the door? How's that going to help? I'm sure there were people in the wilderness that said, I just got bit by a snake and it's killing me. It hurts. I know I'm going to die. And you want me to go out and look at a pole that has a serpent on it? That's crazy. Well, then you died. You died from the venom, which is sin. You died from the venom. Everyone has the disease called sin, which is the venom. But if you went and looked at the pole, and as Yeshua points out twice in John 3 and once in John 12, that just like Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, the Son of Man would be lifted up. When he's lifted up, he'll draw everyone to himself. You go and look. The Passover story, the people are commanded to tell the story in the first person, as if you personally came out of Egypt. You can read all this in Exodus 12 and following. All in the first person. I, we, our. You don't say there, those people, they. First person. As if you personally came out of Egypt, as if you personally came out of slavery. Why? Well, because in its fulfillment in Messiah, its fulfillment in Yeshua, we are delivered from slavery to sin by the blood of the Lamb, capital B, capital L, which if you have that over you, you don't get the curse. You're not subject to the curse. You're not delivered from physical slavery like the people were. You're delivered from slavery to sin. You still have to go into the wilderness and go through the wilderness. The people had to go through the wilderness on the way to the promised land. Land of milk and honey. All the things that are described there about promised land. And as the writer to the Hebrews points out, this prefigured how we, going through the wilderness of our lives, are on our way to the ultimate promised land, which of course is heaven. And so delivered from slavery on the way to a promised land and on a long journey, not a 100-yard dash, not saying a prayer once when you're 15 and then never have to worry about it again. You have to be a disciple. You have to bear fruit. But you're on a journey like the people in the wilderness, delivered from slavery. The people, the Israelites, were delivered not by anything that they did other than follow the ritual that was prescribed. We're delivered from sin not by our own doing, because we can't deliver ourselves from sin. We're defective and we're frail. We can't make up for sin. We have to have grace, unmerited favor. And so Passover has its ultimate fulfillment that way. So all these things, all the feasts, and we're not going to do all the feasts point to him. All the feasts are fulfilled. Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, not completely fulfilled yet, but it will be when he comes back, because his coming back is going to be heralded by a shofar blast that's going to be heard around the world. And then you will have completely fulfilled Yom Teruah or Rosh Hashanah. So he's the fulfillment. So at the Seder, at that last Seder, and when you think about it, those guys who were with him at the Seder, not the smartest guys in the world. Judas was probably the smartest one. Matthew was probably smart, since the Romans used him to collect taxes. The rest of those guys, not very bright. They had been to a lot of Seders in their life, but they had never been to one that was like this. And, in a traditional Seder, I'm sure you know, there's 4 cups of wine. There's Kiddush, the cup of plagues, the cup of redemption, and the cup of praise. At that last Seder, at that last supper, there were 3 cups of wine. And after the 3rd cup, it tells us they sang the Psalms, and then they went to the garden. Because, of course, the Hallel Psalms, 113 through 118, are recited in 2 parts. And then there's the 4th cup of wine. So the 4th cup of wine was not used. So there's 2 thoughts about that. Number one, we know that when Yeshua was on the cross and he said he was thirsty, which is an incredibly powerful statement, because at the Feast of Sukkot, during one of the water ceremonies, he said, "If you're thirsty, come to me. I'll give you rivers of living water." Then he said, "I thirst." And they gave him sour wine on a sponge on a hyssop. And by the way, he used the hyssop to apply the blood of the lamb to your door. So that's kind of interesting too. But he tasted the wine, didn't want to drink it. And then he said, "It is finished." So some people maintain that was the 4th cup of wine. And then when he said it is finished, of course he was talking about the sacrifice is finished, but the Seder was also finished. The other thought, which I don't know, I guess I like better, is because he said, "I won't drink of the fruit of the vine again until I drink it anew in my Father's kingdom," meant that he's waiting for us to come. And when we get to heaven, he's going to have the 4th cup of wine with us to finish the Seder, which was the Last Supper. That's pretty cool. But anyway, 3 cups of wine. And that's pretty clear in the Gospels that there was not a 4th cup. And so that's one of the changes. And those men who were there, it doesn't say what their reaction was, but they probably would have been surprised, because that had never happened. There's 2 hand washings during the dinner. The second hand washing, he washed their feet. Now, that had never happened at any of the Seders they had ever been to at any time in their lives. So things started to be radically different. He washed their feet and said, "If you're clean, if you've washed, the only thing you have to wash is your feet." because you walk around in a dirty world. They walk around literally in a dirty world. We walk around in a dirtier world, even if our feet are clean. Your feet have to be washed. So this was a total departure from what they were used to. And then, of course, he's added that not all of you are clean because his betrayer was there. Now, interestingly, Judas also had his feet washed. And Yeshua calls him friend. Do what you came to do. Do what you have to do. He says, when he says one of you is going to betray me, and they all said, who? Is it me? Is it me? Is it me? He says, the one who dips the morsel into the dish with me. This was at the time that you dipped the matzah, the unleavened bread, into the bitter herb. For some reason, Judas did it at the same time that Yeshua did, and then he left. Really pretty remarkable. That had never happened at a Seder that these guys had been involved with. And then, of course, we already mentioned about the Psalms. Those were standard, the Hallel Psalms, 113 through 118. And you should read those for your homework if you. Those are unbelievable Psalms, especially 118 is used so much in rituals and liturgies and prayers, and it's worth rereading and reading again. But they never had the experience that with the Afikoman that happened that night, because as you know, and I always, when we do Seders, I always say, this is my favorite part, is when you take the bag, the little pouch, the big pouch called the Matzah Tash, which is called the Unity by the rabbis. It's a beautifully embroidered, I should have got it out of my stuff, but I didn't. It's a beautifully embroidered pouch that has 3 separate compartments called the Unity. There's 3, but it's 1. There's 1, but it's 3. And the image of the triune Godhead is, of course, in that. And traditional Jews who do that, of course, don't realize that. But there's a piece of matzah that's put into each pouch. The piece of matzah in the middle pouch. The second piece is taken out and broken. The part that's broken off is put into a linen pouch called the Afikoman, made out of linen. And linen, of course, was used to make burial shrouds. And then it's hidden. It becomes a children's game because after the meal, the children are going to go look for the pouch. They're going to go and look for the Afikoman. So basically, the matzah in the middle compartment, the second person, is broken, put into a burial shroud, goes away for a while, and then is brought back. And when the child who finds it brings it back to the main table, to the head of the Seder, who in the house would be the father, he takes it out of the Afikoman. He takes it out of the linen pouch, I should say, and holds it up for everyone to see. And you can see from that it means it's back. Here it is again. He disappeared for a while, the second person, and now he's back. We're waiting for him to come back now, and it will be another time where it'd be the equivalent of taking the piece of matzah out of the shroud and say, here it is, he's back. Except that they're coming back this next time, which I hope is tonight. This coming back the next time is not going to be like the coming the first time. There's no lamb, no suffering servant. It's going to be completely different. So we have 2 times this is fulfilled in parallel. But then when that piece, and we don't know if there were children there probably were not, but maybe John had to do it because he was the youngest one. I don't know. But when the Afikoman pouch was brought back to the table, Yeshua would have taken it out, held it up for everyone, and then he broke it and passed it around and said, "This is my body." The ending of a traditional children's game. That's really quite remarkable. And this is done in every traditional Jewish home, just like every Friday night. They have bread and wine for the Kiddush. It's a very powerful symbol. Bread and wine, the elements of the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, whatever you call it in your tradition. Very powerful. They do it as a tradition, but don't realize what they're doing. And so at the Seder at a home, for example, the head of the Seder breaks the Afikoman in pieces and passes it around. Yeshua held it up, broke it in pieces and passed it around. Said, "This is my body." But that was the end of the meal. That still is the end of the meal. Nothing further is eaten after that. But then immediately after that, you have the third cup, which is the cup of redemption. And of course, it's interesting and it's not coincidental that it's called the cup of redemption. Because he said, "This wine in this cup is my blood, and it's shed for you. It's the blood of the new covenant. It's the blood of the new and eternal covenant. It's an eternal covenant. There's not going to be another covenant. There's not going to be another Messiah. There's not going to be a different plan of salvation. There's not going to be a third testament. This is the eternal covenant. And it is described in the Seder. Now, some people might ask, well, is the old covenant sealed in blood? Yes. You remember when Moses came down from the mountain, he read the law. And the people said, "Oh, yes, whatever the Lord says, we'll do." Well, it didn't last very long. But Moses then sacrificed 2 bulls, collected the blood, and sprinkled the people and said, "This is the blood of the covenant." Yeshua almost says word for word the same thing. First, you have Moses as the mediator, small m, and you have animal blood, which, the writer to the Hebrews says the blood of bulls and goats doesn't have any power to take away sin. But then you have the mediator, capital T, capital M. His blood has infinite power to take away sin. And there is no one that's beyond redemption. And so all these things are fulfilled. And even reading, everything here in front of me, that's why you see me looking down. Even reading through the Psalms, the completion of the Hallel Psalms after the meal has so many messianic references to it. For example, the cords of death entangled me. The anguish of the grave came upon me. I was overcome by trouble and sorrow. This is Yeshua speaking through David. We're going to get to Isaiah 51 in a minute, I hope, that really describe what was actually going on in the Garden of Gethsemane. So he's entangled in cords of death. kind of like Jonah when he's in the water and he's entangled in cords and he can't get loose. Yeshua said the sign of Jonah is going to be given to you guys. There's another parallel there. It says, then I called on the name of the Lord. Oh, Lord, save me. He said, Father, this cup can pass from me. But your will is going to be done. When I was in great need, he saved me. It says, the Lord will not allow his Holy One to undergo corruption. On the third day, it says in Hosea, I think it's chapter 5, but I'm not positive. On the third day, Israel will be saved. On the third day, something new is going to happen. On the third day of creation, green plants were created. Life came in a totally different way. It says, I'm greatly afflicted. All these men around me are liars. It says, therefore I said, all men are liars. All these people were shouting false accusations at him. It says he's surrounded like by bees. There was so much commotion. All these things are fulfilled in Yeshua, the day of his death. I will lift up the cup of salvation and call upon the name of the Lord. It says, I'm the son of your handmaid. Luke chapter 1, Mary says, I'm the handmaid of the Lord. Be it done unto me according to your will. He says, I'm the son of your handmaid. Again, another reference to him. It says, praise the Lord, all you nations. Extol him, all you peoples. Nations, of course, means Gentiles. Even the Gentiles are going to extol him. And so here we are. In the 21st century, the Christian era, we Gentiles are praising him. Really amazing. This is all in Psalm 118. Verse 117. I don't have it numbered here. It talks about how the Lord has become my salvation. Now, at that point, what are we talking about? The Lord has become my salvation. Time out. They were in a covenant of law. 613 laws, all had to be followed. If you violated one, you violated them all. So technically, you could earn your salvation by keeping all of the law. And Yeshua, of course, kept all of the law, or else he couldn't be the Messiah, because then he would not be unblemished. But here he says, the Lord, God has become my salvation. Now, in the covenant of law, in the Tanakh, God doesn't say, don't worry, I'm going to save you. He says, here's the law. If you keep the law, I'll be your God, you'll be my people. If you don't, I won't, and you won't. When you read through, I was just teaching earlier today from Nehemiah 9. Chapter 9 has a great description of this, where Nehemiah says to the people, we did wrong. We rebelled at every turn. We got punishments that we deserved. We got attacked by foreigners because we deserved it. We got exiled because we deserved it. Just like it says in Deuteronomy, ultimate punishment is exile. While the northern kingdom was destroyed by the Assyrians, the southern kingdom went to Babylon. So he says, we have to turn back. If we turn back, he will take us back. We got just punishments for what we did. Now, if you fast forward to Messiah, you don't get punishment for what you did if you turn to him and repent. He says, God has become my salvation. The God-man becomes your salvation. It's really quite remarkable. And it's another example of he fulfills the law. As Paul says in Romans 2 and 3, it's not that the law is evil. The law is holy. God gave the law. The law defines sin. The law defines holiness. The problem is not with the law. The problem is that we can't keep the law. And so at this last Seder, this is all crystallized into this is the new covenant, which of course then is sealed in blood a few hours later. So all this comes from a messianic look at the Seder. But I started talking about the garden, and we know that after they sang the Psalms, they went to the garden. And you know, Yeshua went off by himself. Those guys couldn't stay awake. And as I like to point out, after eating a huge meal and having 3 full cups of wine and walking, it's probably 2 to 3 miles from the upper room to Gethsemane, it's no wonder those guys fell asleep. But the issue is that there was this agony he was going through to the point where blood came mixed with tears. And he talks about the cup. And the cup is a reference to Isaiah 51. Isaiah 51. And I'm sure that you know this. It has to do with judgment. The cup is a cup of judgment. And so, I'm sorry, I messed that up already. Hard to do with my share screen. But if we go back to Isaiah 51, let's go down to 16. And I have put my words in your mouth. I have covered you with the shadow of my hand, that I may plant the heavens, lay the foundations of the earth, and say to Zion, you are my people. Awake, awake, stand up, Jerusalem. You have drunk at the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury. You have drunk the dregs of the cup of trembling and drained it out. So in other words, your sin, your rebellion, all the things you've done by turning away from him, turning away from the law, judgment has come on you. Whether it's the Assyrians, whether it's the Babylonians, punished for all the idolatry that they had done, including in the temple by the priests, but I'm not going to get into all that. But as Nehemiah points out, we deserved this. We deserved these punishments. So they drank this disgusting cup of judgment that has all kinds of dregs in it. And in 19, these 2 things have come to you. Who will be sorry for you? Desolation and destruction, famine and sword. By whom will I comfort you? Your sons have fainted. They lie at the head of the streets. Like an antelope in a net, they are full of fury of the Lord, the rebuke of your God. In other words, your sin leads to all this trouble. But then here comes the cool part. 22, thus says your Lord, the Lord your God, who pleads the cause of his people. Pleads the cause of the people. See, I have taken out of your hand the cup of trembling, the dregs of the cup of my fury. You shall no longer drink it. You're not going to drink from the cup of judgment anymore. So when Yeshua says, let this cup pass from me, if it's possible, can we do this some other way? He drinks the cup rather than we drinking the cup. It's taken out of our hand and he drinks it. In fact, it's poured over him. And this is a very powerful symbol. It's a very powerful metaphor. It's a symbol of divine wrath and judgment. Isaiah points out, you guys have been drinking this cup of judgment, but now I'm going to take it out of your hands. I'm going to take it out of your hands. You won't have to drink the cup. So all this exile, all these punishments, you're not going to be punished anymore. It's going to be, I'm going to take care of this. I'm taking the cup out of your hands. This is a turning point. It's a cup of trembling. In Psalm 75, David points out, the wicked drink the cup of the Lord's wrath. Well, he's going to take the cup out. Jeremiah says the nations must drink the wine of wrath. In Jeremiah 25:15. He's going to take the cup out of our hands. Ezekiel calls it the cup of horror and desolation in Ezekiel 23:31. But he takes it out of our hand. So all of these show that this cup of wrath, this cup of judgment, is taken out of their hand. And it's not arbitrary. It's judgment for violation. It's judgment for rebellion. It's judgment for you saying, man, I don't have to worry about that. How many times have you heard people say, well, the God I believe in would never do that? So it's wrath. It's not arbitrary. But that punishment for those people, whether it was in the exiles, whether it was the drought of Elijah's time, whatever the punishment was, the cup's going to be removed from their hand, and comfort is going to come. So instead of judgment, you get comfort. Instead of wrath, you get redemption. Instead of exile, you get restoration. He always tells the people, you turn back to me, I'll take you back. You might be in exile, but if you turn back to me, I'll take you back. So this is what Yeshua is talking about in the garden. He has to drink that cup because he took it out of our hands. Took it out of everyone who followed from theirs hand, right down to the 21st century of the Christian era. And so it's really quite a remarkable scene in that garden. And of course, his friends are asleep because they have nothing to do with the cup. He has to deal with the cup, not them. He's taking the cup so they don't have to drink it, as well as we don't have to drink it. So it's really no wonder that he sweated blood, and it is medically possible to sweat blood. You've probably heard little capillaries in the skin break down when there's an intense anxiety or an intense terror that comes over somebody. And it is possible to sweat blood. It's possible to have blood in your tears for the same reasons. So we have this as the sacrifice, capital S, but it's a huge thing. It isn't just he's going to be punished a little bit. It's not just because he's afraid that he's going to die. Galatians 3:13 tells us he becomes the curse. Because cursed is anyone who hangs on a tree. He becomes the curse so that the promises to Abraham can come to the Gentiles. And so it's so important to get all this, to put all this in the context, to make all this the foundation, to make all this the roots of what you believe. So I got through that. That's amazing. I still, I think, have almost a minute left. But anyway, I want to tell you at least two websites. www.rootsandfoundations.org, rootsandfoundations.org. You find Bible study courses there, a 33-part study of the Torah, introductory level, video teachings, audio teachings, a lot of other stuff. www.oneinmessiah.website. The audio versions of Friday night, a lot of audio teachings, a lot of written teachings. Check that out. The YouTube channel, again, is One in Messiah, Gift of Grace Ministries. Two podcasts. One is called giftofgrace.podbean.com. The other is called philgig.podbean.com. Check those out. And thanks for tuning in, and come back next week.